This happened several years ago when I lived with my ex-boyfriend. We recently moved into a 2-bedroom house and set to work turning it into a home. We turned the back bedroom into an office, as the house only had one bathroom and it could only be reached through that bedroom. We would have people crash on our sofa regularly and didn't fancy them having to trapeze through our bedroom to get to the loo in the middle of the night. So we had been living there roughly a month when this event occurred. My ex was out with his colleagues and I was home alone. I had spent the early evening watching TV and eating takeout. A couple times I heard some strange noises, but whenever I would try to zone in on it and figure out what the hell it was, it would stop. It had got later, so I decided to go upstairs and use the computer for a little bit before going to bed. At this point in time, we hadn't had our phone lines installed, and I was still on a pay and go phone, which had run out of credit. I basically had no way to communicate with anyone while I was in the house that night. So I'm sitting in the back room with only a small table lamp that barely forms a glow. While I'm typing away on the laptop, I heard the noises again. It started as a light rattling noise, really faint, to the point where I had to strain to see if I was really hearing it or if I was imagining it. I shut the music off and tried to figure out what it was. I went into our bedroom and looked down to our front door. Nobody's there. I go back into the back bedroom but can't see much out that window. We had a small yard with a high brick wall and I saw a wooden gate with nothing to cast any light. From what little I could see, there was nothing in the back either. I sat back down and switched the music back on. Maybe 10 minutes later I hear an eerie screeching sound, like metal on metal. Again, very faint, as if whatever was making it was trying desperately to be quiet. I was getting more than a little freaked out at this point, so I went out of our bedroom to retrieve a heavy iron rod that we had found in the back of the built-in wardrobe. I didn't switch on any lights as I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't want to alert any possible intruders of my location in the house. Remember, I had no way of calling anyone, and I was getting more than a little concerned that someone might actually be in my house. I made my way back into the office bedroom and closed the door as quietly as possible before bolting and lodging a chair under the handle. Nothing more happens for a good 20 minutes or so. I start feeling a little foolish for letting myself get worked up and put it down as being my first night alone in the house. But I don't switch the music back on this time, which was lucky because I started to hear sounds like two people whispering, both male voices. They didn't sound like they were coming from inside the house though. I had the office window open ever so slightly, and the sound seemed to be floating in from there. I headed into the bathroom to see if I could get a better look into the alley that the house backs into. The office bedroom and the bathroom formed a L around a yard, with the bathroom extending further out. I climbed up on the ledge and inched the window open trying to see out into the alley. I couldn't see anything, but the whispering was louder and coming directly behind the gate. I couldn't hear the whole sentences, but I heard enough to summarize. Whoever these men were, they'd seen us move in, and seen that we had quite a lot of valuable equipment. Guitars, computer, my DSLR, TV, gaming consoles, etc. I imagined they'd seen that I was home alone, and had been waiting for me to go to sleep before trying to get into the house. I stayed perched there for what felt like an eternity, until what seemed like the loudest thud in the world echoed up to me. They'd grown tired of trying to be stealthy, and one or both of them were throwing themselves into the gate, trying to break it down. I could see it shuddering under the blows, and could only imagine how large these men must be. I'm a teeny girl, all about 5'3", and at that point weighed somewhere around 105 pounds. I was white with terror as I watched the gate groan under the stress. I sat clutching the iron rod, trying to think where I could hide from them. Suddenly, a glaring light behind me. At first I panicked and dropped out of sight, thinking they were shining a torch at the back of the house. But then I heard barking and shouting. I peeked again and saw that the house, which was across the alley from us, had a floodlight installed, and it was illuminating both their own yard, mine, and the alley with light. I heard grumbling and cursing and 2 sets of footsteps hurrying down the alley. I stayed locked in the bathroom until my ex-boyfriend drunkenly rolled in at 4 a.m. I didn't sleep a wink that night, and when I went out into the yard that morning, my gate was hanging on by one hinge, allowing easy access from the alley. When I looked at the back of it, the keyhole was covered in scratches, as if someone tried to force open the lock. If they hadn't woken the house behind us, I dread to think what could have happened. So let's go back all the way to the mid-80s. We lived in the suburbs in a close-knit community, so I never had any worries. 11-year-old me was home alone during summer break from school. My mom and dad both worked, so I was just chilling in the living room, blasting the stereo with the front door open. Bit of backstory. My cousin was dating a guy named Jeff. They are now married with kids. Me and him hit it off instantly. He was a few years older than me, but would treat me like a little brother, so we talked shit and pestered each other quite a bit. At this time, we were fairly new in our friendship, but he would call to check up on me. The phone rings. At this time, we didn't have fancy things like cell phones or even caller ID. We had a push-button phone, which we had just bought to replace the old-school rotary dial phone not too long before then. The conversation goes like this. Hello? Hey, what's going on? I'm thinking, cool, it's Jeff. Nothing, just hanging around the house. Are your parents home? Jeff knew my parents worked, but maybe he thought they were off that day. No, they're both at work. Oh, okay, so what are you wearing? This was odd, but this would be something Jeff would say to mess with me. T-shirt and shorts? Are you wearing underwear? What kind? It dawns on me, this is not Jeff. He sounded like him, but holy shit, it's not him. Who is this? David. David who? David Sanders. Who the hell is David Sanders? What do you want? Just wanted to talk to you. Yeah, I have to go. Okay, see you soon. End of the phone call. At that point, my mind was racing. I had no idea what just happened. I just talked to a dude that I didn't know for 5 minutes and told him that my parents weren't home and what I was wearing. Wait, did he just say talk to you soon? What the hell? Okay, I've heard of prank calls before. Someone was just calling random people and screwing with them. Yeah, that's what it must have been. So for about 20 minutes or so, I'm roaming around the house with the door open, blasting music, trying to shake off the call. My mind is repeating the last line. See you soon. There is no way he could have been serious, right? Okay, let's go ahead and shut and lock the door, just to be sure. 3 minutes later, I walk to the front door, and without opening it, I ask through the door, "Who is it?" He replies, "It's David." No effing way. I step to the window by the door and peek out. Sure enough, there's this guy in his mid-20s looking back at me, smiling, and he gives me a quick wave. I can't believe this is happening. This cannot be happening. What do you want? Just wanted to hang out with you. My mind is blank. What do I say? What do I do? My dad is home. He's in the bathroom. What the hell? That's the best I could come up with? Oh, okay. Bye. No way this can be that easy. Nope. I see the doorknob turn. This creep is trying to get in. Luckily, it's locked. I wait a few seconds and look out the window. No one's there. Wait, what was that? I hear someone in the bushes right in front of the bathroom. I run in there, and this guy's standing, trying to open the window. He tries the next one, and is locked as well. Adult me would have called 911 as soon as he showed up, and talked to him through the door until the police showed up. But 11-year-old me? I called my mom. After that, my parents set up a system. They would call, let it ring, hang up, and then call again. And of course, I don't leave the door open anymore. I never heard from David again, though when I was older, I'm sure I would have liked to, and explained to him why he shouldn't be trying to pick up young boys. So my husband, Ted, is in the military. We have generally lived on base, every station we've been to, because the surrounding towns can be crime-ridden and sketchy. And with my husband being gone most of the time, the extra security is appreciated. I work from home due to us moving so often. So one afternoon, I was taking a break. I had made a bite to eat and was snuggling up on the couch with my dog. That's when I heard the sliding glass door open. It was so nonchalant that I thought it was Ted. I saw my cat run from the kitchen and the shadow standing next to the door, entering it. I thought maybe he had come back for something, so I called out to him and was like, "What are you doing home? Did you forget something?" No answer. This is where I got an eerie feeling. After I asked what he was doing here, I saw the shadow move and heard the click of the sliding door lock. From there, he walked into the laundry room and shut the door. I had still received no response, so I'm sitting on the couch, scared out of my mind. I call my husband, hoping to hear his phone ring in the laundry room. I don't hear a ring, but he answers. I asked him why he came home and didn't answer me, and all he says is, "That wasn't me. Grab the dog and get into the car." I freaked out. After getting off the phone with Ted, I grabbed my dog and run to my car. From there, I called the military police. Waiting for them was probably the longest 20 minutes of my life. When they got there, they cleared the house and found no one. They asked me to make a statement, and even they were baffled that someone would try this on base. We still live there, and I'm so scared that he'll come back. I was listening to one of those creepy narrators who narrates Let's Not Meet stories, and one of the stories reminded me of a really scary encounter that I had when I was 13. My parents divorced when I was in the 8th grade, and after my dad had moved out, my mom was very single and ready to mingle, so she often left me home alone. I usually have someone stay the night on those nights that I knew my mom wasn't coming home, so that I wasn't totally alone. So one night, my friend and I, who I'll call Jess for this story, was staying the night, and for some reason we had the best internet connection in the garage, so we were just messing around on MySpace and such when we start hearing what sounded like two people talking. Jess and I stopped talking and were trying to hear what the people were saying. We got up and stood by the garage door, but still couldn't make it out, so I went inside and looked through the peephole on my front door. There were two men standing there in the driveway by my garage looking around. I immediately freaked out because they weren't standing on the sidewalk or anything. They were standing by my garage like they lived at my house. I stood there watching for a minute before one of them started walking up to the door. I quickly and very quietly checked to make sure both locks were locked, then looked back up at the peephole. The man was leaning over the side railing on the porch trying to look into my mother's bedroom window. I instantly signaled to Jess to go get knives and be super quiet. I looked back outside and the two men were back talking by the garage. Jessie asked what had happened, and I just told her to make sure all the doors were locked while I kept watch. She came back quickly and we switched. She kept watching while I looked for the house phone. This was before it was normal for teens to have cell phones. All of a sudden she says, "They're leaving." My heart sank because something in my gut told me that they weren't. Without even thinking, I asked her, "Did you lock the side door in the garage?" And she said she didn't. I took off through the kitchen into the garage just as I heard our side gate open. I made it to the door and locked the deadbolt. Before I could get the doorknob locked, the doorknob twisted. I thought I was gonna puke. I grabbed the handle and locked it before running back inside. I ran to the back door at that point and started yelling, "Lock the windows!" My back door had sheer curtains over them, but you could still sort of see inside and outside. And before I was able to make it to lock the door, I saw someone walking to the back porch. I jumped behind the couch and watched as he tried to open the back door before the second guy followed. Jessie came walking in the living room, and I grabbed her and pulled her down behind the couch with me. We both sat there in silence, terrified, watching these two guys try to figure out how to get in. I started to cry, and Jessie was just sitting there, shaking. After what seemed like forever, they walked off the back porch and into the backyard. We heard them banging around before we saw them walk by the porch again and out the side gate. I ran into the front and looked through the people and saw them walking across the street and get into a car. I told Jessie they were gone. We both burst into tears and started hugging each other. We called her aunt and she came to pick us up and took her to her house, and we stayed there that night. We never told anyone else because we thought we'd be in trouble for some reason. But after that, I didn't stay home alone for years. And even at 25, I still get scared when it's just my daughter and I home alone, and my husband is at work, or at the rare occasion when he goes out with friends. We were lucky it didn't end worse than it did, but I'm still scared from it 12 years later. This story happened a year ago. I was living with my then boyfriend, now fiance. Anyways, we lived in a townhouse in the suburbs. Pretty safe area. There had been some robberies a couple blocks away, but they weren't common, and I felt pretty safe walking home alone at night. So one weekend, my boyfriend's brother Marshall and his girlfriend Amy and her brother Curtis were visiting. We were all just gonna chill and have a couple of drinks and play video games and relax. My boyfriend had his LSATs, and after a couple of months of studying, he wanted to just relax before the exam. Unfortunately, I ended up getting very sick. It was the worst flu I've ever had. Extreme fever, 1 degree higher than I would have had to go to the hospital. I had nausea, headache, body aches, and all that good stuff. Of course, I didn't want that to stop my friends from having a good time, so they came over anyways, and I just stayed in my room. They went out to eat before they came over, so I was in bed alone watching TV. Felt like I was dying. I slept on and off. About 4 p.m. I heard the door open and figured they were back, but when I called out for my boyfriend, no one came up. Even if he was there, he probably wouldn't have heard me, but I knew he would come and check on me as soon as he came back. So I assumed I heard something fall or the neighbors making noises, so I dismissed it and went back to sleep. I was in a deep sleep and groggily opened my eyes and thought I saw a figure move across my room. I was so heavily medicated and so sick I didn't fully understand what had happened and what that meant. Like I saw a figure, but it didn't connect in my brain that I might have seen someone since it was pretty dark in my room. I think part of me thought it was just the TV. Finally, around 7 p.m. everyone comes back. They were loud. Amy, my boyfriend's brother's girlfriend, was tipsy. She's very fun when she's drunk, so there's a lot of laughter. My boyfriend comes in to check on me. He brought me some soup. He sat and talked about his day as I ate. I asked him to look in the basket under the bed to get a new bottle of aspirin. We had a full-size bed, and I had a basket under the bed where I kept extra pill bottles, shaving cream, and stuff like that. I didn't know right away, but thank God he looked under the bed. He put his head up and handed me the aspirin, but his facial expression had changed, like he had lost color in his face. I didn't think much of it and said thank you. Come on, I'm gonna take you to the bathroom. He never stutters like that, but I remember picking up on it. I told him no, I didn't really have to pee, and I didn't feel like getting up. He said, no, let's go. I don't want to have to climb up the stairs just because you need to pee in 10 minutes. I remember feeling hurt by his words, but I knew he was right since I just had soup and half a bottle of water. He walked me downstairs, and I couldn't understand why he didn't just use the upstairs bathroom. I think I was so sick, I felt too exhausted to question. He sat me down on the couch. What's going on? I practically whispered this. He took out his phone and his hand was shaking. I asked him what was wrong, and I'll never forget how my heart sank, and I felt like I couldn't breathe when he whispered, there's someone under the bed. Amy laughed, so I laughed, thinking it was a prank, but it felt serious. My boyfriend's brother suggested we get out of the house, so we did. As we were leaving, we heard a thud upstairs. We quickly left and drove away, then called the police. The police came and searched the house and didn't find anyone. He must have known we suspected he was there and left. My boyfriend couldn't give a description, he only saw sneakers. But it was so dark he couldn't really see anything. The scariest thing still leaves me on edge that the police found a knife under the bed. It was a small steak knife, but very dull and rusty. There weren't any killings in the area, so my friends assumed he just wanted a place to sleep. I'm not really sure how he got into our place, but I have some theories. I'm really proud of how my boyfriend handled everything. He's a calm and collected person, but I always assumed he wouldn't be that way in a crisis. I just hope I never see this person again.
When I was 12, something happened to me when I was home alone. People have asked me what happened many times in my life, and I don't like talking about it in person. But right now, I feel that I need to. Maybe telling a bunch of strangers what happened will help, because therapy is doing nothing. It happened a week or two before Thanksgiving. My parents had gone out to dinner, and then were going to go see a movie afterwards. They estimated that they would be home around midnight. No problem for me. I had been home alone many times, and honestly, I enjoyed the freedom to do whatever I wanted for a few hours. The only thing that was different about this night is that because they were going out to dinner, they didn't make dinner for me before they left. Instead, they ordered me a pizza. I was watching a movie in the living room, and my parents were sitting in the dining room waiting for the pizza to be delivered so that they could leave. Well, the pizza was taking much longer than they expected, and told me to just tip the person $5 when they got there. I found out later that they had reservations to the restaurant, and that's why they had to leave before the pizza guy got there. After they left, about another 30 minutes passed before the pizza guy got to my house. I opened the front door, and a shaky-looking guy that looked like he was on cocaine was standing there, with no pizza. I stood there looking at him bewildered and awkwardly, and then finally asked, "Where's the pizza?" The guy smiled and laughed and said, I left it in the car. I'll go get it, but first, can I come in to use your bathroom?" This was so unexpected. I hate confrontation, so I said yes. I watched the guy walk down the hallway and enter the bathroom. He closed the door. I didn't hear anything, so I sat down on the couch. I couldn't have been sitting for more than a minute. I got up and turned around, and the bathroom door was now open. Expecting to see the guy walk out at any second, I started walking towards it. But my heart sank when I realized he wasn't in the bathroom. I didn't know what to make of this, and for a moment, my mind chose to assume that he had somehow silently went out the front door to go get the pizza. I walked over to the front door and looked out the screen. I did see a car parked out front, but I couldn't see the guy. My imagination started racing with possibilities, and terror set in as I came to the realization that he might still be inside my house. I turned around and went into the kitchen. Nothing. The dining room. Nothing. I yelled out, "Hey, are you in here?" Of course, I didn't expect a response, but I got one. Without hesitation, the guy responded, "Yes." For a moment, I didn't know what to do next, so I stood there, my mind frantically trying to make sense of this messed up situation that I would normally see on TV or in a movie. I decided to briskly exit the house. I walked out the still open front door and towards the guy's car. I circled around the back of the car, and when I got to the driver's side door, I saw the most disturbing sight of my life. A person sitting in the front seat, hunched over the steering wheel, blood smeared all over the window. I looked up and saw the guy standing in the window upstairs, looking down at me. After seeing the guy hunched over in the car, the blood, and then the guy standing in the window upstairs, I ran. I ran until I saw someone. Anyone. There was a woman getting out of her car at some random house, and I actually scared her when I approached. My frantic state must have made me look dangerous. I told her what was happening at my house and asked her to call the cops. She did, and then went inside and asked me to wait outside on the porch. I was so scared, I half expected to see the guy bolt around the corner out of the darkness and find me. All was quiet until 2 cops showed up. They brought me back to my house and called my parents. I didn't go back in until my parents got back, and even then, I thought somehow the cops just didn't find the guy, and he was still hiding somewhere in my house. More cops showed up along with an ambulance. After all these years, we still don't know what exactly happened. Our best guess is some random psycho was walking by right when the pizza guy showed up and stabbed him in the chest. I have no idea why he decided to come into my house or what he planned to do after he got in. He was never caught, and I never saw him again. The thing about all of this that I remember the clearest is the way blood looks smeared on glass. It's a lot darker than what you see in the movies. This happened to my mother before I was born over 20 years ago. She worked at a local bar. The bar mainly catered for fishermen. She knew most of the people who would come in for drinks. However, every now and again, people from town would come in. She told me that one guy used to come in who she had known from house parties around the place and always wanted to talk to her while she was working. She would say sorry and keep doing her thing. One night she finished work around midnight and was walking home, which was fairly close by. When she got home from her shift, she decided to take a shower. After her shower, making her way back to her room, she realized her bedroom door was open, which she normally kept shut. She blew it off as nothing. She laid down in bed to go to sleep. But something didn't feel right, and for reasons she can't explain, she felt the need to look under her bed. What she saw under the bed was the guy from the bar. He had followed her all the way from work. She tells me that she just stared at him for the longest time, and he didn't move, not even breathe, to the point that she thought he was dead. She calmly went out of the room and called the police. They showed up soon after, and when they went into her room, he was gone, and the window was wide open. I live alone in the mountains of Northern California. I don't get many visitors, so I was very surprised one night when I was lying in bed, and I thought I heard knocking on my front door. I opened the door, and there was no one there. I assumed then that it was just something else. It could be a number of things. The forest surrounds my property. It could be a number of different animals. I went back to bed, but not long after I laid down, I awoke to a continuous knocking sound. It sounded like it was coming from my kitchen, and not the front door like before. My house is in the middle of nowhere. The noise was so blatant, and it was getting louder as I approached my kitchen. My house is so far in the middle of nowhere. There is no way that someone could be out there. I turned on the kitchen light. What I immediately saw was horrifying. An arm reaching up from under the window outside, knocking on the window. I was frozen with fear. I turned off the light and went back to my room. Back to my room to get my gun. Once I had it loaded, I went back into the kitchen, but the arm was no longer reaching up, knocking. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. A few minutes went by, and suddenly, but slowly, a man's face slowly rose from under the window and was looking inside at me. He smiled and looked like a deranged psycho. I pointed my Glock at him, and he disappeared. I heard branches crunching outside and the sound of laughter fade, as I assume he ran away. I have lived in this house for 5.5 years, and nothing similar to this has ever happened before. I have no idea who this man was, but to say it was scary is laughable. It's an understatement. This insane-looking man had to walk incredibly far to get to my house. And for what reason? I have no idea. I don't want to know. My dad was out for a job interview, so my sister and I were home alone for about 2 hours. I watched TV downstairs and went outside, and when I went back in, I left the door unlocked for my dad, since it was getting close to the time he said that he would be home. I went upstairs and hung out with my sister for a while. I heard the front door open at one point, and then I could hear somebody moving around downstairs. I just assumed that it was my dad. I then heard my dad's bedroom door open and close, albeit very slowly, and it happened a few times. I was talking with my sister when the phone rang. To my surprise, it was my dad on the other end. He told me that he was going to be getting home late and that we needed to make our own dinner. It felt like my heart fell to my feet as he said that. I realized that it wasn't my dad that had entered the house. I hurriedly rushed downstairs to see if anyone was there. Several things were gone, and the front door was wide open. I then heard what sounded like breathing coming from the downstairs bathroom. I choked the urge to yell as I saw a hand wrap around the door and then a face look around the corner. As soon as the guy saw me, he smiled and then walked out of the bathroom and out the front door. I looked out the window but couldn't see him. On the floor in the bathroom, I found a box cutter. I'm not sure what his intentions were with this weapon, but I'm really glad he didn't use it. This happened 4 years ago. I was 16. My mom died when I was 2 years old, so it was just my dad and I. We lived in an old house that my grandparents owned, and it was falling apart. I never felt safe in this house, even when my dad was home. I always had this gut feeling that someone would eventually break in. I don't know why, and I just hoped that I wouldn't be home when they did. It was a Friday night, and my dad had to work late. I was working on a paper that was due the following Monday, and I wanted to bust it out and have the rest of the weekend to chill and do whatever I want. I was sitting at my desk in the computer room next to the kitchen. There were 2 main doors to this house, the front door and the back door in the kitchen that leads to the backyard. We had no surrounding fence at all. I was typing away, making some good progress, when the phone rang. This was in 2001, and I didn't have a cell phone at the time. My dad did, but the phone I used was the landline. I picked up the phone, and this telemarketer starts going on about selling us a new roof. He literally would not stop talking for a full 3 minutes so that I could say no thanks and just hang up. When he finally took a breath, I said, "No thank you, we rent," and hung up the phone. About 20 minutes passed, I would say, and I was halfway done with my paper. The phone rang again. I picked it up, and after I said hello, I heard nothing. Nothing except breathing. I repeated, "Hello?" And the telemarketer that had called before suddenly spoke. He apologized and said that he must have redialed my house by mistake. I thought it was slightly weird, but told him no problem and hung up again. Not 10 seconds later, the phone rang again. At this point, I had a feeling that something was wrong, and I became very aware that I was home alone. I picked up the phone and in an agitated voice said, "Yes?" I could hear the breathing again. It sounded as if he wanted me to hear him breathing. I then said, "We are not interested and we don't own this house. Please stop calling." I hung up. I got up and walked into the kitchen and got a soda from the fridge. I glanced around and felt really nervous. I watched a lot of scary movies during those times, and this night I felt like I was in one. I felt like I was being watched. I was too distracted to continue my paper, so I went into the living room and turned on the TV. After about an hour, I had gotten over the creepy calls and was starting to fall asleep. The phone rang. It jolted me awake, and I just let it ring, until I thought that it could be my dad, so I ran into the office and picked it up. Before I could say hello, the telemarketer from before said, "You have a nice house." This, as you can imagine, was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. Before I could think of what to say back, the back door to the kitchen opened and then slammed. I hung up the phone and immediately called my dad. It rang and rang, and then he answered. But I realized something when he did. It wasn't him. It was not my dad that said hello. It was him. The guy. The telemarketer. I don't know what I was thinking after that. I remember I hung up the phone and ran into my dad's room. It had a lock. No other room had a lock. The phone rang probably 30 more times while I sat in there and waited. I heard noises all throughout the house, but I can't say for sure what they were. My dad finally got home. It was really late. He told me that his cell phone disappeared off of his desk at work and was disturbed when I explained what had happened. Someone from his work had stolen his phone and had come to our house that night. We never found out who it was. My dad still works with that same company, and it still scares me to think that whoever did this could still be working with him, interacting with him every day.
I was 12 and my older sister and I were home alone for the weekend. I was waiting for my friend to pick me up and getting restless. There was a knock on the door. Thinking it was her, I ran to the door to answer it without checking through the peephole first. A man was standing there with a clipboard and said he needed to check our gas meter. I was enraged in the disappointment and my friend's still not arriving yet, so I just told him, yeah, sure, whatever you need to do. I didn't notice at the time, but he wasn't dressed as a city official. He had on a green and purple shirt with stripes, like the host of Blue's Clues. He came in and immediately went upstairs to where the bathrooms were and walked into the open door of my room. The typical girly girl room with pink and glitter. Thank God my sister came downstairs at that exact moment. She said, "Oh, is that Daphne's dad? Why is he going upstairs?" And I complained about how Daphne wasn't here and was going on about how unreliable she was when my sister cut me off. Wait, if Daphne isn't here, who is that? Oh, he's here to read the gas meters. Her face turned white. She flung the door open and dragged me out, hands clamped around my protesting mouth. She said, "Our gas meters are outside." Neither of us had a cell phone, it being the 60s, and obviously we weren't going into the house to call authorities on the landline. Then my ever-resourceful sister had a stroke of genius. A man was walking by our house, and she motioned him over. She called out loudly into the house, "Oh, Dad, it's good that you're home. A man from the city is here to read the gas meters upstairs." Just as she hoped, the man on the street said, "What are you talking about?" The man in the striped shirt bolted out of the house. The man on the street asked us repeatedly if we were okay, and if we needed him to stay with us until our parents came home. He was very sweet. We were so startled that we barely thanked him before slamming and locking the doors and windows. As irate as my sister was that I let someone in the house, she begged me not to call the authorities because our parents left her in charge and she was worried that she would get in trouble. I didn't want her to catch any heat for my carelessness, allowing some guy in. So I was on the same page. 3 weeks later, a girl in our community went missing. Same MO. She was home alone and the authorities found the door open and no signs of forced entry. My sister and I discussed our options, but deep down we knew we had no choice but to come clean. We told the police everything. I don't know if it ever helped, but they did tell us they had reason to believe that it was the same man. They also tracked down the man that helped us on the street. Turns out we already knew him. He worked at the butcher shop, we just hadn't recognized him. He became a lifelong friend of the family after that. Our parents were mortified. They weren't angry with us, just glad we were okay. Though they did have to review the rules of caution and didn't leave us home alone for a while. They found the girl and said that she'd been held for a few days and then buried alive. They never caught the man, but fear not, he looked like he was in his late 30s in 1960, so in any case, he has to be dead by now. I thank God every day for my sister's resourcefulness and quick action. So I grew up in Las Vegas. I had moved there when I was in 2nd grade, and I was around 7 or so. My mother was working at a motorcycle repair shop in Arizona, and that just wasn't paying the bills at all. So she jumped at the offer of a new job, of course. Fast forward about 5 years. I'm in middle school now. My brother and I were almost 2 years apart. I was about to turn 12, so he was about 10 at the time. My mother, being quite low on the seniority list, was forced to work late nights. This left me and my brother home alone after school more often than not. Our nights were pretty uneventful, usually consisted of avoiding whatever homework we were assigned, warming up leftovers in the microwave, and watching whatever sparked our interest on TV, which was usually WWE wrestling or some kind of cartoon. We usually ended up in bed before our mom got home, but occasionally we'd wait up for her. One night, or I suppose one afternoon, considering it was still broad daylight, everything was pretty normal. My brother sat on the living room floor, engulfed on whatever was on TV, and I was using my mom's desktop computer, feeding my virtual pets. Then there was a rather aggressive knock at the door, which was very odd. I was sort of an outcast child. I didn't really have too many friends, nor did my brother. Even then, we lived in what you consider a senior living community. My mom was the youngest adult there, and was around her mid-30s. My brother, being too short to reach the peephole, doesn't move, only slightly reacts and looks at me. I get up from the computer chair and make my way to the front door to glance out the peephole. I see a man in a black ski mask staring back at me through the peephole. It definitely didn't seem real. It sort of seemed like something from a cliche movie, as if he was dressed to rob a bank. I was immediately scared shitless, and I obviously didn't bother to ask who it was. I slightly stepped away, shut the TV off, grabbed my brother and our small black Pomeranian, and ran towards my bedroom. Once we were safely hidden in my closet, I informed him of what I saw outside. He didn't say much, but he was visibly shooken up and just quietly standing there holding our dog. I slid the teeny flip phone my mom left for us for emergencies out of my pocket and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator the whole call, as the man hadn't left, since the knocks persisted after we left the living room. Somehow she understood me and sent an officer over. Immediately after the call ended with the operator, I dialed our mom. I explained everything to her. She ended up leaving work and headed home around the same time the police had. I'm not sure what deterred him from pursuing further, but of course, the man was gone by the time they both arrived. The officer was clearly not taking any of it seriously, most likely thinking these young boys were just paranoid staying home alone. It was probably just a young man playing a joke on his friend, he explained. However, like I stated, we lived in a senior living center. Who could possibly be playing a joke on? His dear grandma? He then gave us both stickers, as if that would console our nerves, after seeing a masked man pounding hard on our door. Fortunately, I never saw that stranger again, and after that experience, my house, however, had been broken into, as well as my car, 3 times. Thankfully, none of us were present when any of those took place. Since then, my family has moved out of state and installed a security system. So I was home alone on a Tuesday. My brother was at school and my parents were at work. I was 18 at the time. I was taking a bath when I heard my dog barking. It's a pretty normal thing because he barks when people walk by the house, and we have a big window for him to watch from. But this time his barking sounded far away. I kept listening and realized he sounded like he was outside. And I was like, okay, I definitely didn't let him outside. So I quickly put on my clothes and went to my parents' bedroom and looked out their window because it faces the backyard. My dog was actually outside. I realized that someone must have been in the house, so I quickly hid in my parents' room. And of course, my cat sees me and wants in. She's the loudest cat you'll ever hear. She's deaf, so she doesn't really know how loud she is when she meows. So I quickly let her in. And of course, I decided to hide in the loudest, creakiest room in the house. I didn't want to risk being seen, so I stayed. Anyways, I still wasn't 100% sure that someone was in here, because I get paranoid easily sometimes. I freeze at any sound I hear in the house when I'm home alone. 7 years prior, our house had been broken into while I was at school, which is directly across the street from where I live. I decided to call my dad on his cell phone, even though he worked farther away than my mom. I knew he would answer right away. I couldn't really call my mom because she's a teacher, and schools have horrible cell service. So I called my dad and told him, I think someone's in the house. And he was like, okay, call the police. So I called the police, and at that point I could definitely hear someone downstairs in the kitchen, opening up cupboards and stuff. The person stayed on the line with me the whole time, asking me things like my name, age, and stuff to calm me down, I guess. But by that point, my voice was getting pretty shaky. My cat was meowing her usual hello meow at me loudly, over and over, which didn't help, as I was trying to hide from the intruder. So eventually the operator asked me if there should be any cars parked in the driveway. I said no. She said there's a blue Saturn with a license plate, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, that's my mother's car. By that time I heard someone downstairs yell, police! I went downstairs to see my mother, and a couple of policemen looking at me. I explained that that was my mom, and I didn't think she was supposed to be home. This was a Tuesday at noonish. She never comes home for lunch. She apparently had a meeting at my brother's school that day. They said to try to communicate better in the future. At least I know they can be at my house within 5 minutes. So yeah, that's my story. P.S. Sorry, Mommy.